All right, thank you to everybody for getting here. And we've got a lot of really great information to cover with you today. So without further ado, Judy and Melissa, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Judy Teven, and with me is Melissa Sinanu, and we're excited to be hosting today's webinar. Today, we're going to review the guidelines around the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Now, before we get started, I do want you to know that we will be recording this session, and we'll send it to you, to everyone who's registered. So, and if you have any questions along the way, please just throw them into the chat. Our ClassWorks team is there ready to field them. And if we miss any, we're also going to have a Q&A little session at the end of our session, okay? So let's just dive in.
So the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund includes both the CARES Act from last March, as well as the CRRSA, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, that was signed into law in late December 2020. So we're going to go over a few things about the legislation itself before we talk about how different districts plan to utilize their funds for maximum impact in accordance with those DOE guidelines. So first and foremost, use your CARES Act money first. The DOE clearly states they want to see the CARES Act money spent before the December relief funds. Also, even though the money can be spent on similar things, they do want the spending tracked separately. So two, the money in both cases is retroactive. You can use these dollars to cover pandemic-related expenses that your district incurred back as far as March 13th of 2020. And just like the CARES Act, the December money is expected to be used for addressing learning loss, preparing schools for reopening, and then testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings. It is interesting to note that the legislation refers to certain aspects of the allowable expenses as being additional allowable uses of funds. However, there is a clarifying statement on the DOE's website that everything permitted with the new legislation was actually also permitted with the original CARES Act. So all that to say, rest assured, you can use both sets of money to meet your needs. It's also important to note, while the money is being allocated using Title I Part A, it should be tracked separately from your title dollars, and it doesn't have the same restrictions traditionally associated with title funds. And then one notable distinction between the CARES Act from last spring and the relief funds from December. This is the equitable services requirement. This latest bill actually includes a separate program of emergency assistance for non-public schools. So as a result, school districts are not required to provide equitable services with the new money to private schools like they were under the March CARES Act. So we will send the DOE's FAQ along with the recording of this webinar as well.
That's great. So now that we've reviewed the elements of the fund allocation, let's talk about how districts are interpreting this and applying the dollars. Now, from speaking to large, mid-sized, and small districts across the country, there are really four main things that they believe will maximize the impact of their investments. Now, the first three impact all stakeholders in the building and community at large. So this includes your hardware and connectivity, reopening readiness, and SEL needs of students too, of course. Now, the fourth category is combating learning loss. And this is a little bit more complex and includes a number of district recommendations in and of itself. Now, today we will review some of the top things that we heard in our conversations. Recommendations such as take inventory of existing programs, individualize learning for students, streamline your processes, build a school schedule with intentions. And this includes thinking about summer school, extra learning time built into the school day, and extended day programs. And of course, provide professional development really to bring it all together. So let's look first at hardware and connectivity.
So yes, hardware and connectivity. As Mark Schneiderman pointed out recently, without technology, instruction would not have taken place in any meaningful way last spring. Schools and service providers have responded by scaling infrastructure, modifying procedures, and repurposing resources. So building internet capacity and distributing more online devices remain the top priorities for school districts across the country. We heard this in our conversation with stakeholders, and it was also reflected in a survey of the National Association of Federal Education Program Administrators.
And I'm sure that everyone here already knows this, but it's important to complete your one-to-one hardware and your 100% internet objectives for your districts. So this isn't just so that you can be flexible if something happens in the future. It's really about how to best prepare our citizens to be productive post-secondary adults who thrive in today's world.
So now the good news is that those 5,000 Chromebooks you ordered last May can be budgeted against the CRSSA dollars. So without going into too much detail here, every district we talked to said this was the number one priority, and efforts would not stop until all students had devices and adequate access to the internet. There's also further legislation that will hopefully make this even easier to achieve. As this pandemic taught all of us, internet access needs to be considered like power and water, right? A utility, not an add-on that's optional.
Right. And this leads us to reopening readiness. There has been a lot of conversation about the safe return to schools. Much of this focuses on having clean buildings that are well ventilated and proper expectations for students and staff to keep everyone safe. Now, most school systems have already invested hundreds of thousands of dollars preparing for their schools to safely open or reopen, or in the case of New York City schools, $1 billion. Now, the good news is that both the CARES funding and the new December relief funds, the CRRSA, can be applied backwards toward these costs.
And so some of the investments our partner districts are making include effective contract tracing plans, right? Don't just rely solely on your principals. This is a burden that so many of our smaller rural systems were placing on school level administrators, and it really was overwhelming. Building dashboards for community transparency. We know that schools are rarely super spreaders and that infection rates in schools are reflective of infection rates in the communities and not vice versa. So reporting on those cases with effective dashboards really makes this fact clear. Maybe contracting with a company that will analyze your secondary transmission rates and help determine what to display on a community dashboard. And of course, masks and other PPE.
Everyone's goal is to get students back in their classroom with teachers, and there are some great models of success out there, as well as some warning stories. I'm sure everyone remembers the district early in the pandemic that proposed moving students to a different desk every 15 minutes to keep extended exposure from occurring. We've really come a long way since then, and the news is just getting better. As of February 3rd, about 1/5 of teachers who belong to the nation's largest teachers union have already been vaccinated, and another 18% have scheduled their first shots.
So next, looking forward to schools fully reopening safely everywhere, let's shift our focus to discussing the social and emotional learning needs of our students. There's been a great deal of discussion about the impact of the pandemic on the health and well-being of students. So everyone agrees that schools need to reopen. And for many reasons, right? I'm sure everyone has heard some of the more extreme, dispiriting news that remote learning has contributed to. So meeting student SEL needs was a priority for almost all of the partners we spoke with, and especially for our large school districts. We know children's social development has been adversely impacted by the isolation of the pandemic. Now, as Judy said, we can rejoice that the end does appear to be in sight, even if it's coming much more slowly than we like. However, that means when students come back to their school buildings, their state of mind is likely to be very different than it was 12 or 15 months ago. Now, there are great SEL screening tools like Panorama that we've heard so many districts are investing in. Tools like this give you a feel for your school's climate and the student body's mental health. But the reality is we need tools to combat the findings and begin repairing those who are suffering. The SEL screener is a starting place, not the solution.
Yes, from students who suffered personal tragedies to those that have had not really had any structure or expectations from adults in the last year, everyone looks to their teachers to help make things better for them. So we need to give teachers the resources to communicate with their students and help them take the steps that they need to experience success at school and beyond. Now, we've heard from systems large and small that SEL tools will definitely be a priority use of this relief money. And one thing that districts are struggling with is how to truly integrate SEL into every aspect of student learning and school climate instead of having like a separate resource that just feels like one more thing.
So that's why we implemented ClassWorks Goal Tracker. It's a digital goal setting and monitoring resource for students into our intervention program. Goal Tracker actually incorporates the SMART framework, which is a widely used research-driven approach that helps students create clearly defined and measurable goals. And it builds a strong connection between teachers and students as they work together to determine realistic goals and the necessary steps to achieve those goals. This is especially valuable for helping students develop those two important core competencies identified by CASEL, both self-awareness and self-management. Students set a goal, they identify the steps they will take to achieve the goal, and they identify how they will know when their goal is achieved. Then they have a conversation along the way with their teacher as they take the steps to success. They also identify a confidence level as they progress. Setting and achieving goals, no matter how lofty or small, is a really important way to get students into the mindset of success. So now that we have discussed some of the priorities for the community and schools as a whole, right? Hardware connectivity, reopening readiness, and SEL needs of students, the legislation also has a very specific focus on learning loss and closing the achievement gap. State education agencies are expected to report back to the DOE on the following: how their state is using funds to measure and address learning loss among students disproportionately affected by the coronavirus and school closures, including low-income students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. So with that in mind, let's think about some options we heard for maximizing student growth, particularly in communities disproportionately impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah, this really means making an investment to help meet students where they're ready to learn and then transition them back to successfully achieving on grade level. So there were 5 things that we specifically heard over and over that we hope that you find as meaningful as we do. So first, take inventory of existing programs. Know what you have, what you are using, and what's working. Individualize learning for students. Individualization is more important than ever right now. And streamline processes. Streamlining clarifies your goals and as a bonus, eases the burden on teachers. Build a school schedule with intention. Think about your summer school, your extra learning time, after school time, perfect opportunities to extend student learning. And of course, provide professional development to ensure that your mission is executed.
So first, taking inventory of what we have and why we have it. There are a lot of ed tech resources on the market. However, it's really important to know the why of each of your resources to make sure you're not either doubling up on one thing or potentially trying to use one program for one use that was intended for another use. For example, if your teachers love Google Classroom, likely you don't need an additional expensive LMS like Canvas or Schoology. Study after study indicates that the programs that work are accessible, integrated, and effective. And districts will eliminate apps that are challenging to deploy or implement, not scaled or easily scalable, not accessible to all students, or lack demonstrated alignment or useful data or learning impact.
And also, when taking inventory, you may be tempted to repurpose certain instructional resources. It's really easy to say, well, the kids use X product as a resource in the classroom when learning math. Let's just use that for interventions too. Unfortunately, this isn't going to be a successful strategy. Students that are struggling on grade level need programs specifically designed to close learning gaps and offer a structure and a progression that supports that. Now, while they have their place, games that give students practice on instructional goals for the classroom offer a very different benefit than true intervention.
Right. Let's think about the technology used to run your district. At a minimum, you have financial software, an email system, your student information system, your lunch program, maybe school bus routing software, and likely a million more. It's super obvious to all of us that these programs can't be interchanged with each other because they meet such distinct needs. Keep this in mind as you inventory and select educational software as well. What purpose does each serve? Can any serve multiple purposes? What maybe are we missing, right? So as more and more school solutions are online, we need to start thinking about our educational technology the same way. A classroom technology resource is not interchangeable with an effective evidence-based intervention solution. So take inventory of the technology investments you already made and remember the goal you had with them when you originally purchased them. For example, are your progress monitoring tools being used in those SST meetings to refer students for additional testing? Or are your schools still relying on teacher referral and grades? If you aren't using a resource for its intended purpose, decide if you're going to invest in the professional learning to update your processes or just get rid of the program. Also, look for the flip side. Is there a platform that effectively serves more than one purpose that you can expand utilization of? Either way, evaluate programs and their features with care.
Yeah, we know it is tempting to try to use something designed for one purpose and hope it will serve your needs for another. Unfortunately, this is confusing for students and rarely ends up with the results that you're looking for, and definitely not a best practice for RTI, especially when it is something as important as closing gaps. When it comes to closing gaps, the investment must be in an evidence-based solution that is distinct from your core curriculum and its accompanying resources. Now, once all of that hard work has been completed, you've identified what you're keeping and what you still need, you're ready to start thinking about how you're going to apply your remaining funds to quickly and effectively combat the COVID slide. So it's time for individualized learning for all students.
Even before the pandemic, teachers faced classrooms with students at all different levels and struggled to meet everyone's needs. Now, those variances are even wider. While there is a lot of conversation around small group tutoring and instruction, we think it's important to distinguish between best practices for small groups as opposed to true individualization for every student.
We were recently talking with some school leaders in East Baton Rouge, and they commented that they still find educators that confuse remediation and intervention. Okay, so remediation is traditionally used to help students who are struggling with the concept currently being taught in the classroom. Remediation is ideal for teacher small group. In this environment, the teacher can offer a new way of looking at a skill for a small group of strugglers.
Right. Then intervention is needed when students are missing skills from earlier grades. To truly close gaps once students need an intervention, you need a process of administering regular short assessments and then an adaptive learning progression that offers students a chance to learn the prerequisite skills they missed from earlier years. The teacher's role in intervention is to support and motivate and conference with students. It is not practical or reasonable to ask classroom teachers to find and deliver the needed intervention resources. This is when a high-quality technology tool, like Classworks, effectively supports student achievement and removes a heavy burden from teachers. Now, especially this year, many of your students will likely need both remediation and intervention. It's important not to put students in one bucket or the other. This is also why RTI best practices do not allow student intervention time to be in place of core instruction. This must be in addition to the time learning those on-grade level standards.
Yeah, for example, let's look at the ClassWorks platform in these environments. ClassWorks provides teachers the flexibility along with the content they need to provide both remediation and intervention for students. So what do we mean? For remediation, teachers create specific lessons correlated to skills that they're teaching in class. These are assigned to small groups of students who need extra practice. Then teachers meet with these students in those small groups to review those concepts and ensure that students are really understanding, right? Possibly even using ClassWorks classroom reading and math activities for this. Now, ClassWorks supports student intervention a little differently. Students have an individualized learning path composed of the skills that they need at the level that they're ready to learn them. As students work on their intervention, progress monitoring measures how well the student is responding to the intervention. Instruction, growth, and mastery data all in one place ensure that intervention is relevant and on track.
So next is streamlining processes and expectations for students and teachers. So look for one interface that can meet all of your intervention needs. The legislation specifically calls for administering using high quality assessments that are valid and reliable to accurately assess students' academic progress and assist educators in meeting students' academic needs, including through differentiating instruction. Also implementing evidence-based activities to meet the comprehensive needs of students. Finally, providing information and assistance to parents and families on how they can effectively support students, including in a distance learning environment. So we talked about taking inventory of what you have and why you have it, and what your district goals are for a program. Let's apply that same principle when looking for the right tools to meet this moment.
Our district partners love ClassWorks because of our one login, and you have high quality screeners in both reading and math. Evidence-based individualized instruction that helps close gaps, progress monitoring to easily track the goal for all students automatically, right? And a wealth of parent resources to keep all stakeholders engaged. Accomplishing multiple goals with one intervention program is a great start to streamlining. Now, however, you may have a screener that you inventoried and decided, we love this. It serves exactly the right purpose. So think about what teachers are expected to do with the reports after the screener is administered. Don't put your teachers in the position of reviewing reports and then finding interventions for each and every student. Do what DeKalb County here in Georgia does.
That's right. Our partners here in DeKalb County have found that the NWA MAP test is a great screening tool they used before and during the pandemic, and they plan to continue to use it. But their partnership with ClassWorks is what makes that data come to life for DeKalb teachers and students. Every night, we sync results from NWA and individualized learning for all students across the district. This lifts a huge burden off the teachers. Here at ClassWorks, we don't ever want you to feel like valuable time is being spent testing when students really need instruction. So we play nice with assessment products from around the country. We take those NWA MAP results, your Renaissance STAR results, Scantron, even Ames Web Plus tests, and individualized learning for students automatically with those results, not just with our own awesome screener. So this brings up an important aside for all of your technology decision making. Involve your district tech team early in the decision-making process. Make sure a program works with your rostering system and your existing screeners if you have them in place already.
So the next topic is a big one, the school schedule. It's amazing to hear how aligned so many of our partner districts are in their approach to creating schedules that are so responsive to student need. Many of the districts we spoke to that are serving at-risk communities are projecting the percent of students that will need Tier 2 or Tier 3 learning support will exceed 35% of their total student body. Something as seemingly innocuous as a well thought out school schedule can really have a huge impact. And we talked about 3 different aspects of the school schedule for next year with district leaders. Those are summer school, extra learning time during the school day, and after school programs. So first, let's talk about summer school. Many of the larger systems that we've been talking to, from Atlanta Public Schools to Jefferson County, Alabama, are planning a 4-week, 5 days a week, in-person or online summer school in order to begin addressing the expected learning loss. They're even discussing making attendance mandatory if they're legally able to do so. And we've had some very interesting conversations along the way. So, such as how to recruit teachers to participate. Multiple districts are using their funds to pay teachers at their daily rate for each day of summer school. This will equate to double pay for a month for those teachers. Another conversation is around how to select students who are ready for exposure to next year's skills versus catching up on last year's skills. This is really important when offering summer school to all students. Classwork screening helps teachers determine exactly where students are performing to make the best use of that precious time during the summer.
And every single educator we talk to really wants students physically in the classroom for summer school. They know it may not be realistic, but they believe that this is when the best outcomes will start to happen. Now, simultaneously, these same educators are currently planning to offer both online and in-person options in order to get maximum participation. No matter where students are learning, Classworks is the perfect fit for summer school. That summer bridge learning happens wherever the students are. Students need dedicated time to work on closing gaps so they'll be able to tackle new concepts next fall. So at home or in the school building, students work on the skills they are ready to learn. And teachers love having the data from both assessments and skills that are mastered in order to make sure students are moving forward. So what we're really talking about is turning summer school into the extended school year. When we contrast that with the optional half-day, 12-day summer schools of previous years, this should really have a great impact. So next, we're talking about building extra learning time into the school day. So Gwinnett Public Schools, they put in place that extra learning time starting this school year, but we're seeing this take shape in a number of ways for next year in all different districts. Again, in conversations with so many of our larger partners, they're going to include in all school schedules, extra learning time in reading and math at least 3 times a week. So this is dedicated time for every student to work on the exact skills they are ready to learn. This also ensures that no students are pulled from core classes for intervention. And for your students that are ready for a challenge, well-designed individualized learning may even be a chance to extend to higher level skills. And this is also a great chance to develop student understanding that even though we're all learning the same thing in math class, when we go to another class, we're all learning different things, and that's okay.
That's right. And many systems have discussed building after school or extended day programs to mitigate learning loss. Now, experience says that these are best when facilitated at school by staff as facilitators who already know and appreciate the students that they're helping. Now, there are 2 important aspects of extended learning. Is the focus on a given day remediation for skills students struggle with in the classroom that day or week, or is it on mastering intervention skills the student missed from previous years? There are a few specific things that our Classworks partners appreciate when we are the primary resource for this extended learning. Now, we think about the classroom teacher. They can decide if the skills being worked on are for remediation or intervention, right? There is always confidence that the intervention curriculum is relevant and targeted. The classroom teacher can track student progress on their after-school work and have conversations about students' efforts and achievements. This is really the key to an extended learning day success. The adults that are in charge of the students' classroom success have easy access to and communication about the work completed in that after-school environment.
So the final component that we heard from folks about is professional development. Professional learning is the key to embracing the initiatives you want to put in place. You're working to choose software that gives teachers the tools they need. ISTE says that investment in software without professional development never leads to good outcomes. Teachers are overwhelmed. Another program without the why and the proper support for effective implementation will not have the desired outcomes. Even the most intuitive and user-friendly program in the world needs professional development that helps teachers understand exactly when they will use it, why they are using it, what data they will be looking for, and what success looks like.
And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but I believe the emphasis is important. You have likely had many programs in the past that failed due to a lack of a cohesive mission. That mission is most often established during professional learning for teachers. And when I was teaching, each year there was something new. And it might be strategies that I was adding to my own classroom structure or plans from the school or the district level. But honestly, adding new ideas and tools was invigorating. Really good PD can provide that energy that teachers need to put a new plan in place or just step up their game. Maximizing your investments with meaningful professional learning for new or existing programs is really a great use of your relief money. And remember, if you're one of the lucky few that can find a substitute, you can use your funds to pay for subs as well. Now, to accomplish this, though, choose educational partners who support teachers in multiple ways. Now, this means PD, of course, but also daily support. In ClassWorks, for example, we have in-product chat. This allows staff to get answers quickly and when they're working in the program. Additionally, teachers have a repository of articles, resources, and videos at their fingertips. And professional learning should not be a one-size-fits-all. Make sure that you're offered flexible delivery options, in person or virtual, micro-learning or traditional sessions. Your professional learning needs to reflect how your teachers learn and how to best accomplish your goals.
So we've covered a lot of ground here today. Beyond some basics about the legislation, we discussed the 4 key areas our partner districts say they will be the focus of their investment. That includes hardware and connectivity, reopening readiness, meeting the SEL needs of students, and combating learning loss. Within learning loss, our partners advise focusing on taking inventory, individualizing learning, streamlining where possible, reimagining school schedules, and, as always, professional development for all initiatives. Large infusions of funds into a system can be a double-edged sword. There's great opportunity to have the kind of impact you see is needed, but there is always anxiety about what the best decisions are. I hope hearing what some other districts plan to do and how they are prioritizing their allocations gave you some great starting off points.
And as always, to those of you that are in our ClassWorks family, please let us know if you need any support as you plan and execute your goals. And we have a little extra time, I think, for some questions.
Yes, we do. That was great, guys. So we do have a couple of questions that were either listed in chat or PM'd, but let's get started. The first question that was sent in was, how quickly do we have to spend our money?
So you actually have, if I believe, until 2023 to spend your money.
Perfect. Just looking here, it sounds like we have been reviewing SEL Tools. Do you have any recommendations?
So that's a really good question. I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at approved lists for screeners right now for SEL Tools. We really feel like it's important that SEL is part of everything that you're doing instead of a separate component that only gets implemented in a silo, really. So thinking about every tool that you're looking at, does that include an SEL component in it, and can they really work together? Judy, I'm not sure if you want to add to that.
No, I mean, I think that's been a lot that we've heard is that they may even get a screener in place, but they don't have anything else happening. And a lot of them are embracing. A lot of our partners are embracing our tools to use to track everything. But it really needs to be embedded into everything that happens during the day, right?
For sure. And then we have an RTI question for you guys. Why should the intervention be different from last year's curriculum?
Oh, that is a great question. So RTI best practices consistently state that it's really important that you approach the concept when the student's in tier 2 or tier 3 differently than it was taught to them in tier 1, because obviously they struggled with it in tier 1 and they need a different approach, right? Just the same thing that they failed last year is really going to be self-defeating for students. So you'll see that in most of the RTI documentation you read, that you want to have a different resource and a different instructional approach taken to mastering those skills when students are in tier 2 or tier 3.
Sure. And then we had a question from Mandy, I see in chat too. She was wondering if Classwork syncs with easy CBM assessments. We can provide the interventions matched to what ECCBM identifies as the skill areas of need. And I see that you've just given me your email address. I'll make sure I follow up with you more about that topic. But Classworks has a really thorough partners page. If you're on classworks.com, you can see the assessments that we sync up with.
And we're always looking for new partners to integrate with. So if we don't have a technical integration with EasyCBM right now, we'd love to partner with your district to set that up, right? The more the merrier with the partners.
Sure. Those were all of the questions that I have on my list that came in. So we can give it a couple more, like a minute or so more, and see what else trickles in, guys. Don't be shy. We're here to answer any questions that you guys have. And if you're feeling extra bold, you can unmute and ask yourself. All right, it looks like that's all we have, guys. Thank you so much, Judy and Melissa. We'll be sending out a recording of this to everybody who registered, along with the list of questions that were asked today, and some other resources that you guys can access to learn more about the CRRSA and CARES Act.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, guys.